Hi, it's Elise here at Bowman Library, the whole new teen book spotlight. So for this week, we are taking some inspiration from the fact that April is National Poetry Month, and we are taking a look at some novels in verse. So these are books, like fiction stories, that are written in a poetry-esque type format. So even if you don't like poetry, you can still celebrate National Poetry Month by reading a novel in verse. And they are some of the best books I have read. And sometimes what's great about them too is they look like they're like a hefty book, but they actually do read pretty fast and you just get sucked into it. It's awesome. Now, a lot of the novels and verses published tend to be on the more historical genre side, but we do have some today that aren't. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. So even if you're not a historical person, we got a novel and verse for you. So let's get started. Our first one is Solo. So this novel in verse takes you inside what it's like to be the son of a famous rock and roll star. 17-year-old Blade Morrison has seen it all through his father's numerous drug and alcohol-induced downward spirals, and he is still grieving the loss of his mother. Now, considered by his father to be a constant disappointment, Blade finally has had enough of his father's antics, and then when this humongous family secret gets revealed that changes everything, Blade decides he needs to get away, and he travels to Ghana, all the way in Africa. There he starts to become the person that he's always wanted to be, and he makes relationships that are more meaningful than any of the other ones he has ever had. Filled with music and musical references, you'll find yourself in Blade's shoes and start to wonder what would you do if you were in his situation. And it couldn't have been easy to grow up in that type of spotlight to begin with. This is Solo. The Seventh Raven. I will preface it by this. This is by David Eliot. If you love Greek mythology, he has done some of the best novels and verse retellings about Greek mythology. This one, though, The Seventh Raven, is based on a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. And it takes place in this isolated forest where these two parents, Jack and Jane, they work in this small cottage, and they have 7 sons. Now, the 6 oldest share the same name as the dad. The youngest is called Robin, and he's completely different from everyone else. Everyone else is kind of like, more, hands-on, working, with their hands, building, constructing. He's more on maybe the arts creative side. Now, Jack and Jane, they really want a daughter, and they pray every night to have one, and then when their prayers are finally answered, their daughter is stillborn, and Jack loses it. He tries to make this deal with whoever, nature, God, whoever, and he curses his sons, and he asks that they be turned into ravens, and they magically are. And because of that, because of this trade that's made with the universe, their daughter becomes alive. But they don't have their sons anymore. They're now ravens. And while their brothers hate their new reality, Robin actually kind of really likes it. And he could never think about going back as a human ever again. Now, fast forward 15 years, their daughter, whose name is April, she discovers the secret about what happened with her brothers and when she was born, because she hadn't known up until this point. And she decides that she needs to set out, she needs to find her brothers, and she needs to try to make everything right in the world, because it's not fair that they are birthed now so she can be alive. But it's going to require more from all of them than they ever thought that would be needed. And maybe not everyone wants this change. So if you like a fantasy, thought-provoking story, keeps you on the edge of your seats, a fairy tale retelling, this is it. This is The Seventh Raven. The Trial. So this historical fiction novel in verse provides a unique perspective to one of the biggest crimes in American history. You may or may not have heard about it. This is all the kidnapping and the murder of the Lindbergh baby from his crib in the 1930s. Now keep in mind, Charles Lindbergh at the time was like the greatest American hero. He had flown solo across the Atlantic. He could do no wrong. This is a true event. Like, his baby was kidnapped and then found, unfortunately, dead just off the property. Now, our main character, Katie, she lives in this small town where Charles Lindbergh lives, and then all of a sudden, because this crime happens, newspaper people, reporters, spectators, everyone comes from all over to this small town, and all of a sudden she's soon wrapped up in all the drama. Fast forward to 1935, the man who has been arrested for this crime goes on trial. His name is Bruno Hauptmann, and Katie finds herself in the courtroom when this all starts happening. She is a witness to the proceedings, the prosecution, the defense, everything. And as the case starts to unveil itself, to unroll, Katie soon starts to realize that this is not as cut and dry as what everyone else thinks or what the newspapers make it out to be. And she starts to have her doubts about the justice system, especially when there are some pretty clear injustices done to the defendant, because everyone wants to find him guilty, and she doesn't know if he really did it or not. So this is based on a true story. You will find yourself learning about this event, because a lot of times you only hear about like the crime itself. You never really hear about the trial, but you will be asking yourself along the way, trying to figure out, did this guy really do this or not? This is the trial. The death of Jason Porter. 16-year-old Jason is struggling to get through life, having a really hard time. He's at this prep school. He doesn't fit in. He's a scholarship student. Everyone there is wealthy. Everyone there is white. He is half black, half white, so he doesn't really fit in there. But then he also doesn't fit in at home. When he gets home, he tries everything he can do to avoid his alcoholic, abusive mother. He tries to stay in the projects where they live as far away from her as possible. And just when he thought that things could not get any worse, any more complicated in his life, his best friend dies in a meth lab explosion, and Jason decides he needs something else. So what he decides is he's going to go find his missing father, who was addicted to drugs. And when Jason finally finds him, his father reveals a secret that rocks everything that Jason knows, thinks he knows about himself, his family, everything. Jason doesn't know how to deal with this news. He doesn't know how to process it, and it's the last straw. Not knowing what else to do, not knowing how to deal with this, Jason decides he's going to jump off the 7th story of their apartment building. He's going to commit suicide. He doesn't want to live anymore. He doesn't know how to deal. But when that doesn't go to plan either, it may actually be what Jason needs in order to start turning everything around. This realistic and gripping look at Jason's struggles is one that every reader can relate to. Maybe not to the extreme that Jason's dealing with, but we've all had our struggles, our trials, our tribulations in life that we don't know how to deal with. If you love to read an intense, a gritty book, this is not for the faint of heart. It does deal with some intense issues and feelings, but it's an amazing look at this. This is the death of Jason Porter. Song of the Sparrow. So if you love reading about King Arthur, medieval times, this novel verse is perfect for you. So it's the year 490, and Elaine is 16 years old. She's living in Arthur's military camp, and she's being raised by her widowed father and her 2 brothers. She is the only female at this camp. From a very young age, though, Elaine has been in love with Lancelot. We all kind of know Lancelot from, if you know your King Arthur. She's been in love with him, and she dreams of them being together. And all of a sudden that quickly changes, though, when one event happens. That would be when Guinevere arrives at camp, because, as the legend goes, she's going to marry King Arthur. She's going to become queen. Lancelot, though, as soon as Guinevere gets there, he falls deeply in love with her, because that becomes quite the love triangle there eventually. But Lancelot falls deeply in love with her, and because of that, Elaine automatically hates her. And the feeling is mutual. Guinevere really doesn't care for Elaine either, for a number of reasons. One day, though, they are headed for battle. Elaine decides to follow the army, even though she's not supposed to. And the 2 of them, Guinevere and Elaine, are going to meet each other if they are eventually going to survive, as they are kidnapped. Plus, it's going to be up to them to save this army from the battle they're going into, because it's not quite as fair as it may seem. It's going to be pretty one-sided if they don't take care of it. Now, this unique retelling of the legend of Lady Elaine is one that's gripping, but it's also filled with drama. There's romance, has a little bit of violence, but if you like some serious girl power, if you don't mind some girl drama either, this is it. This is Song of the Sparrow. And our last one for today is Tea 4. So this is set in Nazi Germany. Many people forget that the Holocaust was not just about trying to eradicate the Jewish people, but there were many other groups targeted for extermination as well by the Nazis, including where our main character falls into. So our main character in this novel and verse is 13-year-old Paula, and she's living in rural Germany and she's deaf. That made her a prime target for the Nazis to arrest her and to send her off to a camp because of her disability. They didn't want anyone with any type of disability. One day, living in fear, trying to figure out what's going to happen, a priest shows up at their house, and he offers to provide Paula shelter to keep her safe and hidden. Not knowing what else to do, Paula and her family agree that this is the best thing, and all of a sudden Paula finds herself living in this church shelter, and when things quickly go south there though, and she is forced to flee, she's on her own to survive. She can't get back to her family. She's in the middle. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know who she can trust. And this is told from her point of view. You get insights into her thoughts, her feelings, how her decision-making process, how she's going to get out of the situation she finds herself in. This is an impactful read that I can remind you of so much more that happened during that time of history than I think what we forget, unfortunately. But they deserve to be remembered. This will stay with you long after the last sentence. This is T4. So these are 6 of the books we have here at the library. They're novels in verse. So I encourage you to come out, celebrate National Poetry Month, or you don't even need National Poetry Month to read one of them, but we have 6 of them here, and I can promise you we do have more than these 6, and they are amazing. So I encourage you to come out, check out one of these, or we can help you find that other perfect novel in verse that you may be looking to read. I hope you tune back next week when we have a whole new teen book spotlight, and I hope you have an amazing week.